Okay, let's go to the next one. And says this: My husband struggles with pornography, and it makes me want to become cold and distant. I know biblically it's not okay, but I'm so insecure now and hurt. Can you help me? So, I mean, you already talked about this about not having this expectation from the worldly aspect, but now you have somebody who's bringing all that into a relationship, and now the wife knows that, and now it's a major thing. So, what would you tell her?
I heard you and Steve dealt with some of this issues a month ago or so on this Facebook
I think it was Steve and Zach, actually. But yeah,
Zach,
a couple weeks ago, if you go on the Facebook Live, he talked a little bit about this.
Okay, so he talked about it from a man's point of view.
Yes.
Okay, so that might be a good place to think about. But pornography is something that is very destructive. I understand that. It's something that can be done in the privacy of a person's car or home. We all now have devices where it's very easy to get a hold of it. We just did a little research before the show. 1 in 3 women, this is back from 2017, it said 1 in 3 women now struggle with pornography as well. So it's a very prevalent issue in our society. Pornography, though, is not something that a woman should take personally. I should say, pornography is not something that as a wife you should take personally. It's something that your husband does that has really, in essence, nothing to do with you, and that's where it's wrong. Right there is that sex and the thought process of sex and all of that belongs in marriage, and it should be there. From the man's point of view, God calls it adultery. From the women's point of view, it's something that we are asked to, if it is adultery, and we've been asked to forgive our husbands in that. Then now, how do we begin the process of putting intimacy back into the marriage? And really, we just kind of read those scriptures and how you do it. You have to be forgiving. Number one, you have to be forgiving. And if you've been asked that, and you have given forgiveness, then what you do from that day forward depends upon you. So if your husband has asked you for forgiveness, and as it stands today, you don't know if it's happened again, then you living in the place of him doing it is wrong on your part. So what I'm trying to say is that when we are asked to forgive, and we are to forgive as Jesus forgives, then that means we don't get to bring it up. We don't get to bring it back up to our husbands. We shouldn't be bringing it back up in our own mind and hearts. It's something that we have to just practice walking in. And so a lot of times what happens is that women get it into their heads that they're not pretty enough, they're not sexy enough, their bodies aren't the right shape enough, we don't measure up to the supermodels, and having your husband look at pornography can exacerbate that, make that even worse. But it's really not about us, unless, and I'm going to give a caveat here, when there's pornography or adultery, there has been a breakdown of the marriage somewhere. And when there's a breakdown of marriage, that's 2 parties. So if you're being disrespectful to your husband all the time or treating him like a child, pornography can make him, quote unquote, feel like a man. It can make him feel more in control of himself in that way. I know that sounds a little weird, but it can make him feel like more of a man. If you're not treating him like a man, then he's going to go find some other way or somewhere else that he can feel like a man. Doesn't make it right, but that's what he can do. So look at that. Number 2, are you keeping yourself in the best possible health and body that you can? So if you are being lazy with your health or lazy with your physical body, then maybe that's what your husband needs. He needs you to just be a little bit more caring about that. We women we've talked about this earlier too, we sometimes don't care about physical bodies. I know there are some of you who do. I wouldn't like it if Mitch got really, really heavy because I'd be concerned about his health. But I'm not attracted by sight. Men are attracted by sight. That is, again, that's the way God created them to be. So we as wives need to be aware of that. And so that's the number 2 thing. And another number 3 thing is that, are you withholding sexual intimacy from him? Do you tell him no all the time? Do you say that other things are more important? Do you put other things as more important? Can you be what they call a cold fish in bed? And you have to be wise to that as well. So again, just as 1 Corinthians 7 says, is my body in this area does not belong to me. It belongs to Mitch. He gets to tell me. He gets to communicate with me what he needs from me. And vice versa, I get to do that with him as well. And it says right here why. So Satan doesn't tempt us. So this is not to say that every time a man looks at pornography, it's his wife's fault. That is not what I'm saying. But I don't know the specifics of this question, so I kind of have to give you it in a nutshell. So if there's something more that you would like to know about that, make an appointment with me. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. I have a lot more things that I could give you if you would give me some specifics. But the way you move past any sin, and pornography is sin, is forgiveness, and then you work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So how do you help your husband not fall again to that sin? How can you help him? Pray for him, talk to him, be careful with the movies and the things that you're allowing into your home. I had a friend who, she really got upset if her husband said he didn't want to watch some rated R love story with her. Don't do that. I mean, you're just opening it up for him to be tempted. So be careful with what the movies and the books and all those things that you're watching yourself. But the way I look at it is that you don't fight sin and compromise with another compromise. So if you have forgiven your husband, and as far as you know he's not practicing that sin anymore, then that should be under the blood in the past, and now you do what God says. And God says you don't deprive each other for that. And if you have to, you do the same thing that you would do even if this wasn't here. You go into your bathroom and you pray.
Yep.
God, he needs me right now and I don't want to do it. Well, you just go and do it.
Yeah, because God gives you the will.
Yes, and the
and
want
to do it.
and the how to.
And
Yes.
it's good pleasure.
Yes. So I hope I answered the question as much as I possibly can here. But just be wise to that in your own life. How are you helping your husband to move past this sin? Being his not only sister in the Lord, but his helper comparable because you're his wife. And ask the Lord, is there some way that you might have made it easier for him to fall to this sin? Because it doesn't matter if it's sexual immorality in the sense of pornography. If Mitch is constantly being mean to me, I'm going to struggle with some sin, right? And so he has to kind of look at that himself too if we want to move past that. Does that make sense? So I don't blame it on him. I don't get to stand before the Lord and say, well, if he wasn't so mean to me, I wouldn't have acted that way. But from a marriage perspective, we both are to be working on a solid and biblical and godly foundation for a marriage. We both are supposed to be working on it.
Okay. Okay, so and this is what I love about Christianity, and I think you have to be willing to take a rebuke. If you can't take a rebuke,
Right.
you ain't gonna make it in Christianity.
Right.
And if the guys have been watching the show and stuff, one thing I've noticed is that when the ladies are on here and there's a question, like this is a deep, hurtful thing that their
Yes.
husband's doing, but your answers are not pointed at them.
Right.
It's pointing towards the ladies.
Yes.
And when Steve's on here, guess who? It's the opposite.
Right.
Now, why is that? Well, because in Christianity, we can't do anything about anybody else.
No.
We're supposed to be honoring to God. And in the Romans 12 that Mrs. Winry read about presenting your bodies a living sacrifice, he ends that chapter with never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable.
Yes.
And it's the idea that you sacrifice yourself because in Christianity, it's others first.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you don't worry about it. All the stuff that they're doing to you, you don't repay them.
No.
You don't get vengeful.
No.
Right.
You know,
No.
you do what
Right.
honors God.
Exactly.
And that's a hard thing to take, especially like I'm trying to picture myself as a girl listening to your answers, and it's kind of like
It's hard.
ooh, because it's like, you know, because you want to just rip his throat out and stuff.
Well, yeah, it hurts. Because really, in essence, he did commit adultery on you. That's what the Lord Jesus said. So it's a cleaving of a relationship that was not supposed to be torn in two, right? So, I mean, God created sex to bring oneness into marriage. And it's the intimacy of marriage. And obviously, we all know that it's a picture of our relationship with Christ as well. But the way the Lord speaks to my heart when I'm struggling with these issues is he literally will make it personal between me and him. So Marcy, when you sinned, when you gossiped, when you were angry, when you did these things, you need to see that broke fellowship with me. You broke a covenant relationship with me in that sense, is that I chose to do what I wanted to do besides obey my Lord, which he created me to do. Does that make sense? And so I have to look at it that way. When Mitch offends me or he sins against me, I have to look at it when I'm dealing with that issue and getting my mind to line up with, or my heart to line up with my mind, that I want to forgive him and move past it. That's what I have to do business in that way. God doesn't see the sin of pornography any less than if you are withholding sex and manipulating your husband that way. God doesn't see the sin of pornography any more or any less than if you are angry at your husband all the time. He doesn't see it that way. It's level, it's even. And so that's how God has always done that with me. I've asked Mitch many times, will you promise me that you will not do this thing? And he's like, well, I can. And I remember the last time I said that to him, God said, so you promise that I want you to promise right now that you're never going to get your feelings hurt and get mad. And I can remember sitting there like, I can't do that. And he goes, then neither can he. And so that's not the issue. The issue is not whether he promises he's not going to do this thing or not. The issue is are you going to love your husband enough to help him through it, to hang in there with him? Because he hangs in there with you when you're hurt and angry and you're yelling at him and you're crying that you don't love me anymore. You know, all those things that he has to put up with me.
So I'm glad you pointed out the study Steve already, or the show that Steve already did, pointing towards the guys. Because one thing you say about pornography can make a guy feel more manly if he's having problems with his marriage. And while that's true, one thing, and I'm paraphrasing what Steve says, but one of the things he pointed out is you're not more manly.
That's right.
You're
Thank
a pansy.
You.
All right?
Thank you.
You're taking what you're supposed to have with your wife and you're doing it with some thing on the internet. But I mean, come on.
Yes.
Don't be ridiculous.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what Malachi 2:13-15 talks about. You're what does it say?
You're not supposed to defraud him.
Yeah. You're not supposed to deal treacherously with the wife of your youth.